And now a few words about our speaker. After graduating in 1954 from the Columbus Academy and in 1958 from Miami University, David entered the life insurance business and has faithfully served his clients ever since. In addition to his insurance business, he has written 9 books and a few years ago wrote and produced a play, A Couple of Kids Once More, which chronicles the teenage lives of 5 girls growing up in suburbia in the 1950s. David and his wife Rita have been happily married since 1958, having 4 children and 7 beautiful and talented grandchildren. Please welcome David Cohen.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Today we're going to talk about a book, Dreams Can Come True, which is the Lewis and Jean Madison story. What we will be discussing are Jewish immigrants who came to the United States and ended up in Columbus, Ohio, and became successful merchants who enriched our community. I want to go back in history a little bit. Back to 1840, there were 2 families that came to Columbus, the Gundersheimers and the Lazaruses. And both of them, by the way, became merchants, and we'll talk about that. But they also were 2 of the founding members of Temple Israel, which is the largest, the oldest religious organization in Columbus, Ohio. In fact, Simon Lazarus in 1846, when the temple was founded, was the first rabbi of Temple Israel. That was an unpaid position. And 5 years after that, in 1851, Simon Lazarus founded Lazarus. Now, Lazarus was not in the building that we look back to, the 6-story building. It was a storefront down near where Alan Weiler's office was, around Forrester's, around 175 South High Street. And it was a store of 20 by 40 square feet. And it went from 20 to 40 square feet to what we know is one of the greatest retail stores in the country. If we move then from the founding of Lazarus up to 1892, 93, there was a fellow by the name of S.M. Levy, who was from Chicago. And he traveled to Columbus one day to visit a dear, dear friend of his who happened to be the governor of the state of Ohio, William McKinley. And the governor said, "Hey, SM, you know, there's a store we've got up here sort of in the south end of downtown, and maybe you would want to have a store on the other end of town." And he said, "Well, that may not be a bad idea." And he traveled up North High Street and stopped at Long and High and built a store which was called the Union. It was a men's clothing store, exclusively for men. And 3 years later, it burned down. In 1904, he rebuilt it and added women's. So it was a men's and women's store with basically accessories, but it was called the House of Quality. And that was S.M. Levy. And then if we move, then in 1909, I'm giving you the date, in 1909, Lazarus moved to the store that we know at Town and High, the 6-story edifice. Also then, in 1924, S.M. Levy had a daughter named Fran, and she married Alan Gundersheimer Sr., who they founded The Fashion in 1924, which was directly across the street from Lazarus. So when we go back and look at the geography at the time, we have Lazarus and The Fashion at one end, and we have the Union at the other end. And along comes, about 6 years later, in 1930, Lou Madison, who opened up Madison's. So let's talk about Lou Madison. He was born in 1893 in Russia. And just like the Gundersheimers and the Lazaruses and the Levys and many other immigrants, his family came to the United States to escape race discrimination and accepted the challenge that in this country you can live life up to your potential. His father, as the story goes, was a milkman. And Lou would go with his father at age 10 and go to the creamery every morning at 5:30 in the morning, load their wagon with their dairy products, hitch up the horse, and go deliver their dairy products. They had 2 routes. on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and one on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. At that point, I believe Luke learned about customer service because he said many, many times, the key to success is customer service. So he was able to deliver the products, speak with his clients, make change, check the inventory, and they started at 5:30 every morning, and they were finished by 8 o'clock so he could go to school. And so he was a hard worker from day one, dedicated, focused. He did graduate, by the way, from high school in 1910 and spent the next few years at odd jobs. And now we come to the year 1917, which was the beginning of the United States for World War I. Lou is now 24 years old, and he enlisted in the United States Army, was stationed in France. He fought, he was wounded, he was awarded the Purple Heart, and on November 11th, 1918, as we know, Armistice Day, the war is over, and he's back in the United States at age 25. And he's now set for the roaring 20s to come. During the roaring, the 20s, Lou's older sister married a fellow by the name of Harry Israel, who owned a group of women's store called David Stores. And they were on the East Coast of the United States. Lou started working with Harry as a stock boy, and eventually during the early and mid 1920s advanced and was opening up new stores for the company. He was learning the business. One day, when he was opening up a store in Cleveland, Ohio, which was their westernmost location, he met a beautiful young sales clerk at a department store whose name was Jean Halperin. Jean was born in 1904, had 11 brothers and sisters. The family was poor, but was able to eke out a living. From the time Jean was a youngster, her dream and goal in life was to make something of herself. As one of the younger siblings, she was able to earn English quickly. Jean prided herself on the fact that her English was perfect. She was not fond of people who spoke with accents. Jean wanted a new life. She wanted a life of class and sophistication. She wanted to live life to the fullest. She was 23 and Lou was 34 when they fell in love and got married. The year 1927. They decided their future was not to be in Cleveland, Ohio, but Columbus. The 20s was a learning period for Lou, and he embraced every aspect of retailing. He understood and embraced the fashions of the day and had a knack for predicting future clothing needs. He knew by the late 1920s that he had to own and operate his own women's clothing store. This was his passion. This was his destiny. He was absolutely focused. However, bad news. On October 29th, 1929, the stock market crashed, as we know, and those who thought they were going to be rich by next Tuesday weren't. However, in 1930, he created Madison's, located at 72 North High Street. At the time, the competition was Lazarus, who had been in business now for 79 years. The Union had been in business for 40 years, and the Fashion for 6 years. Everyone told him, who needs another women's clothing store? I think the same thing was said to Les Wexner in 1963. They each felt that they could create a niche market for their clothes and accessories. They both were focused and determined, and each one became highly successful. The only difference is that Wexner has a few more zeros on his net worth statement. In Lou's mind, women between the ages of 25 and 50 would be his target market. Lou had some core values. These just weren't verbal. These were written core values, which I was able to read. He said he wouldn't have employees, he would have associates. Service would be the byword of his clothing store. If his customers got what she wanted, the business would get what it wanted, which was profits. Communication would be face-to-face. His associates would always say please and thank you. Every customer would be treated with a smile, and his customers were always queens. All alterations were free. Free gift wrapping was available on every purchase. The atmosphere of the store would always be warm and inviting. His customers were loyal to him and the store. These principles and core values never changed for the entire run that Madison's was in business. He was doing so well during the 30s and 40s that he opened up stores in Akron, Lima, and Mansfield, which were run by family members on his side of the family. His store was known for fur coats and special occasion outfits. Madison's was well known in the industry as having one of the finest coat and fur departments in the country. The store also specialized in separates, coordinates, moderately priced jewelry, shoes, accessories, and sleepwear. It even had a hair salon. At Madison's, you could be dressed from head to toe without spending a fortune. At about the same time that he was opening up his brand new women's clothing store, he and Jean were producing children. It wasn't all work and no play. First of all, there was Joyce. Joyce was born in 1929. She passed away in 2015. She was a beautiful person who radiated warmth and charm with everyone that she knew. People called her Miss Manners. She dressed to the nines. She was absolutely gorgeous. She never was an employee at Madison's, but she roamed the aisles, the stores, looking at all the merchandise and making sure that everything was going smoothly. Her specialty, I believe, was that she would help men pick out outfits for their girlfriends or wives. In my first notes, I said girlfriends and wives, but I changed it to or. So whatever. A man would come in and say, I would need to buy a blouse for my wife for her birthday, and they would walk out with a mink coat. That's how good she was as a salesperson. And then there was Betsy, right here in the front row. Hey, Betsy. Betsy was born in 1930. She just turned 91 years old. Another round of applause. You know, there was James Dean, the rebel without a cause. But before James Dean, there was Betsy, a rebel with a cause. Betsy is upbeat, vibrant, and outspoken. If you need an opinion on any particular subject, ask Betsy. She is willing and able to express her feelings. Then there is David, the baby of the family. Born in 1932, and David will reach 90 years old this coming January. What a baby. David graduated from the Columbus Academy in 1951, served in the Navy, and joined his father in the store in 1956. In 1976, he resigned from the store and became mayor of Bexley for the next 32 years. He's a legend in his own mind. He really is. And lastly, there's cousin Sally. Everybody said, who is Sally? Well, Sally was born in 1922 and passed away in 2010. Well, and Sally was a cousin, which means that her mother and father lived in Cleveland as one of the 11 siblings that Jean had. Well, unfortunately, in 1936, when Sally was 14 years old, her mother died unexpectedly and her father abandoned the family. Betsy tells me that her mother said to her, get in the car one day. The chauffeur is going to drive us to Cleveland. We're going to pick up Sally and she's going to come live with us, which she did. They never adopted, she never was adopted, but she went by Sally Madison, and Betsy and Joyce and David always viewed her as being a sibling, not a cousin. Sally went to East High School, and when Billy Glick was getting out of the service, they got together and got married and lived happily ever after. Sally was absolutely a beautiful person. Then there's Jim Jacobs, who was born in 1928, and he passed away in 2017. Jim graduated from Indiana University with a degree in business. He was a brilliant businessman and athlete. In fact, he was city racquetball champion. He was destined for success from the time he was a young man. Tall, good-looking dude, as they called him. He met Joyce at an Indiana fraternity party where she was visiting when she was a student at Ohio State. And of course, it was what? Love at first sight. It always is. They got married in 1951. Jim served in the Air Force after that, and he joined Lou and David in the store in 1956. Lou had to be elated to have his boys with him. So here he was in 1956. He's running the store. He now has his son and son-in-law. These three guys. He's had to be set for the future, and I bet he said, man, the next 30 or 40 years are going to be a great run. But sadly, the next year, Lou passed away, 1957. Now they had to come to a decision, keep or sell the stores. Gene, who was president of the store, and David and Jimmy as vice president, had to make the decision or keep or sell. And we know the decision was to continue operating the stores. David tells me that without the leadership and know-how of Jim Jacobs, the stores would have never survived. The store continued to be profitable, and beginning in 62 and 63, they opened up branches in the various shopping centers around Columbus. David tells me, or says that he remembers vividly the day they opened their store at Kingsdale Shopping Center in Upper Arlington, same day. Their store was absolutely next door to the Limited. Apparently, the Limited had more depth of management as they opened up a few more stores than Madison's. Right. As mentioned before, David left in 1976, which was the same year that Gene passed away. But Jimmy Jacobs brought in new management people as well as his son-in-law, Bill Bone. Madison's continued to prosper, but times were changing. In 2002, Jimmy decided to sell the business, unfortunately, Madison closed its doors in 2003. The last two surviving retail merchants in downtown Columbus, by the way, was Lazarus and Madison's. Most middle-aged people today never heard of Madison's. But those of us seniors, when the name Madison is mentioned, a smile comes to our faces. A quality women's store proving that dreams can come true. It certainly did for the Madison family. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. We can now take some questions.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Kay Hellman. I don't have a question, but my mom was the assistant manager at Kingsdale for 25 years. And I worked there, and I was telling David, I remember when he would come into the store, everybody was, and it was, all those values that you said were so true, but it put me through college. I made $20.32 a week, unfortunately. David was there all the time, however, but it put me through Ohio State and, working summers and holidays. It was a great experience. And our generation, those of us that were baby boomers, I guess, kind of grew up with the mature clothing. But I also got my wedding dress there, my trousseau there. I mean, it was a great store. And again, thank you, because you were in charge then. But I love the fact that you're a mayor also. So just added.
Good. Thank you for that. I just want to mention one other thing that I didn't put in the talk. I checked with some executives that were at Lazarus and asked them, was Madison's ever a competitor of yours? He said, well, everybody was a competitor of ours, except, he said, we were the big dog. We made the rules, but he said, we did follow Madison's very, very closely. And he said, when I talked about the fur department, he said the fur department used to drive us just a little bit crazy because he said they were fabulous. And he said, many, many people who bought from Lazarus had gone to Montaldo's, Milgram's, Madison's, Bradford Hush, all the other stores to check, but they always come to us last. But he said, guess what? We didn't get many that had shopped at Madison's. They had branded it and they were loyal to that store. And one senior vice president happened to be the same name, Al Cohen, who was a dear friend of mine. And he would go to the various branches of Madison's, and he said he was just overwhelmed of the welcoming that he got at every store. Every clerk was, hello, thank you, glad you came, all of that. And he said it was just a fabulous experience. Yes.
Well, I don't want David and Betsy to think they're the only heirs of a retail family. Our family, my dad's family, had stores in Indiana, throughout Indiana. In fact, they were the largest retail stores in Indiana, the largest shopping centers called Weiler Brothers. My dad lived in Hartford City, Indiana, and the Weiler Brothers store opened there in 1898. Bobby and I went over to visit the building, not recently, but not that unrecently. And the interesting thing about it is the store had about 100,000 square feet, had a communication system in the store with wires. It was a very upscale store, but unfortunately the store had to close in about 1920 because of the Ku Klux Klan in northern Indiana forced it to close, forced it out of business. Yeah. So my dad moved to Columbus with his family, thinking he was going to, his father, my dad's father, thinking he would be a partner in the Union Company. But I don't think the Levy's had shared that same thought. So he never joined the Union Company. Okay. But anyway, that's how he came to Columbus. But it's interesting to think that Ku Klux Klan in northern Indiana had the power to close a Jewish-owned store that recently.
Wow. Thanks. Yeah. Good information. Thank you. That's great.
Hi, just a little bit of trivia. As I was a young girl growing up, our mothers would put on their hats and their gloves and their high heels and take the girls downtown, and they would go shopping. But there was, I'm going to call it a feeder bus on High Street that would take you from Lazarus. And today we at that point, it maybe was Morehouse fashion.
Yeah.
And took you over to the Union and Madison's. You could shop, take the feeder bus back, made it very easy for everybody to shop at all four stores.
Yeah, that's right. Someone else had said that. That's good. Thank you.
What?
The what? Oh, the air door? Yeah, we'll talk about that. You got another story. I'm sorry.
Yeah, what factors led to the store's eventual demise? I mean, what things were in play that caused that whole generation of retailing to kind of shift over? I mean, Lazarus did, but many others didn't.
You know, I tell you the truth, I do not know. I did not research that part of the business, but I know downtown it just, you know, like in the book I wrote, it died. I mean, everybody went to the suburbs, and but Mount Aldo's went out of business, Milgram's went out of business, all those stores went, and I assume the customers disappeared. I don't know. I wish I knew. One little story I got to say that my wife said, it was about Lazarus, and it has to do with Alan Weiler, and I told the story a million times before in other books. Is that 1956? You remember the air curtain door at Lazarus? They had this air curtain door, and they were going to open it up on Remnant Day, the first day of Remnant Day, which was the big sale day for Lazarus. And I got to believe it was in the summertime. It was in August. And Alan is across the street with the president, I think, of the fashion. And just the two of them are on the east side of the street, and on the other side of the street, waiting to get through the air curtain door. There's 1,000 people lined up from there all the way down to State Street to get through this this door. Anyway, so they opened the permanent doors, and there's no door, and people were coming in, and the president said to Alan, I don't mind they have remnant days, but when they got a door that sucks people in, he said, I think they've gone too far. So that's the story I heard from Alan Weiler. But it's a good story. Anybody else have any comment? David? Well, I was good at that. David and Betsy, the whole family has been friends since the earth cooled, as they said. So I was glad to do it, and it's just other families could have been picked, but they were just typical of what was going on at the time. And it is amazing that we are all sitting in this room in the lap of luxury. And if it weren't for those generations, we would have nothing, in my opinion, what they had to go through. And we should never forget that. Well, David, the rest of the story, which I didn't talk about, that you told me, that when you were 9 or 10 years old in February, your dad on a Sunday would drag you down to Madison, down to Lazarus to look at the storefront, and you hated it. You couldn't wait to get home. And I think you decided at 9 or 10 that you did not like retailing. Yeah. Well, listen, I want to thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoyed it, and maybe we can do it again sometime. Okay. All right. Thanks.